Mark, please tell your mother to stop. I'm begging you.
Silence filled the dining room the way smoke does. Thick, choking, something you can taste. The chandelier hummed above us. A fork trembled against a plate somewhere down the table. My hand drifted to my belly, the small curve that held the only thing in this house that truly felt like mine. Then, smack. It came so fast I didn't even see her hand. I only felt the sting and heard the sound crash through the room like a whip. My cheek burned, my ears rang, and a metallic taste washed over my tongue. The world tilted. For a breath, everything was bright white. Evelyn, my husband's mother, didn't sit back down. She stared at me as if I'd stolen something from her. You think you belong here, in my house, carrying my son's child? I swallowed hard. Please. I'm pregnant, I whispered, as if the word itself could shield me. I pressed my palm harder over my belly and willed our tiny heartbeat to keep beating. Across the table, Mark's jaw tightened. His knuckles turned pale around his fork. Mom, stop, he said softly, the words thin as paper. Lauren, his sister, laughed, that brittle little laugh that always made me feel small. She leaned back, swirled dark red wine, and tilted her head. Stop. She needs to learn her place. You think a ring makes you one of us? I turned to Mark. Say something. Please. My voice cracked on the last word. No answer. Just a silence so loud it felt like a verdict. Then the kick, sharp, deliberate, a boot of pain into my side. I folded at the waist, a cry breaking out of me as the room blurred. Gasps, a chair scraped, the chandelier chimed lightly as if to applaud. No one moved. Not Evelyn, not Lauren, not even him. I pressed both hands to my belly and prayed, clumsy little words tumbling out of me to a God I wasn't ready to meet. Our baby had kicked that morning, a gentle flutter that felt like a promise. I clung to that memory like it could keep time from moving forward. I looked up and saw their faces, curious, entertained, satisfied, and I realized this wasn't just hate. This was a lesson, a warning, a war. If you were me, would you have stood your ground or walked away? My name is Sarah Collins. I was raised in a town where mailmen knew your dog's name, where neighbors brought casseroles and grief in equal measure when life got hard, where porch lights meant come sit a while. We measured people by how they treated the store clerk, not by the car in their driveway. That's the world I came from. I met Mark on a rainy Thursday. My car stranded, my patience thin, my umbrella inside out like a broken bird. He pulled up in a Navy sedan, rolled down his window and said, "Looks like your chariot's got opinions." He made me laugh when I wanted to cry. He called a tow truck, handed me his jacket, and walked me to the bakery next door so I wouldn't stand shivering on the street. I thought, this is a good man. The kind who remembers birthdays and brings coffee just the way you like it. The kind who doesn't forget to ask how your day was and then listen to the answer. We married in spring. My father cried when he walked me down the aisle. My mother tucked a little lace handkerchief into my palm like courage. When I said I do, I meant it with every part of me. What I didn't understand then was that some marriages are between three people. A husband, a wife, and a mother who can't let go. The first time I met Evelyn, I wore my best dress, pale blue, simple. I brought a pie I'd baked, the way my mother taught me. Press the fork around the edges so the crust looks like sunshine rays. Evelyn glanced at the pie like it was a stray cat that had wandered in. She never looked at me when she said, "Small-town girls don't last in families like ours." Mark squeezed my hand, whispered, "She'll come around." He said it with such certainty I wanted to believe him more than I wanted to breathe. But families like theirs don't come around. They circle you. They measure you. They take apart your kindness to see where the seams are. It began with little things, the kind that seemed too small to name without sounding foolish. Lauren offered to fix my hair before a gala. You have such a pretty face, Sarah, if only you'd highlight it correctly. Evelyn corrected how I set the table. Knives face inward in this house, and watched me while I moved the silverware, her eyes two pins in a velvet cushion. They commented on my dress for church. White is bold for someone new, and on my accent. Sweet, but a little rustic. I laughed them off the way women are taught to. I went home and told myself that love would melt their pride like ice in summer. Love would be enough, but love doesn't cure contempt. It only makes you a softer target. When we found out I was pregnant, I thought maybe, just maybe, this would be the bridge. We told them over Sunday dinner. I placed the ultrasound photo beside the salt and pepper. The baby looked like a comma in a sentence that hadn't finished yet. I waited for hugs, for tears, for any sign this would pull us together. Evelyn looked at the photo, then at me. I hope you're up to the standard this family requires, she said. Children raised in this house don't eat from paper plates. Lauren peered at the grainy picture and smirked. Do they have maternity etiquette classes in your town? Mark cleared his throat. Enough, he said softly. But enough never meant enough in this family. It meant file it away for later. I told myself to be gracious, to be patient. I told myself a child would make us all kinder. But people don't become kinder because a baby comes. They become more of what they already are. By the third month, their whispers had teeth. I stood at the sink after dinner one evening, washing crystal glasses I was afraid to break. I heard Evelyn in the doorway, low and sharp. She's not good enough for this family, Mark. She never was. A baby won't change that. I froze with a dish in my hand, water running over my wrist like cold truth. Mark murmured something I couldn't hear. The conversation ended with a familiar sigh, the kind that says, I don't want to fight about this right now. Sundays turned into contests I didn't know how to win. Lauren arrived in gowns that shimmered and eyebrows arched to the heavens. I came in cotton that breathed and shoes that didn't blister. The table was a stage, and I was always one beat behind, one note off key. Carrying the air, are we? Lauren said one evening, eyes skating over my simple dress. You might consider trying a little harder. She smiled without warmth. The cameras catch everything at these events. They're family dinners, I said gently, not press conferences. Same thing, Evelyn said, buttering a roll like she could butter the truth. People talk. They always do. At 5 months, Lauren reached across the table, a wide, pleasant smile, and accidentally tipped her wine. Red spilled over my white maternity dress, blooming like a wound. She didn't gasp. She didn't apologize. She just watched it spread and said, Oh dear, it's so hard to keep white pure. Evelyn laughed softly. Some colors aren't for everyone. Mark's hand tightened around my knee under the table. The pressure said, Don't. Please don't. I went home and scrubbed the dress until my fingers pruned. The stain didn't come out. Some things don't. There were other little cuts. A charity luncheon where Evelyn introduced me as Sarah from out of town. A fundraiser where Lauren waved me away from a conversation about schools with, Don't worry, we'll handle the important decisions. They talked past me as if I were a coat rack, useful, quiet, easily moved. I longed for my mother's kitchen, for counters nicked by years of chopping, for the smell of cinnamon on a Sunday. I thought of calling her every time, of telling her I didn't know how to be this version of myself around these women, but I didn't. I didn't want to worry her. And I was ashamed. Ashamed that I couldn't make them love me. Ashamed that I kept trying. The night it snapped was supposed to be simple. Roast chicken, string beans, a family photo afterward for some newsletter I never saw. I wore navy blue. Mark told me I looked beautiful. I believed him. We made it to dessert before the wind changed. Lauren held up a little box tied in gold ribbon and said, A gift for the mother-to-be. Her smile was a knife. I opened it and found a book inside. Polish Yourself, A Lady's Guide to High Society. There was a chapter flagged. How to dress for dinner in families that matter. I closed the book and looked at her across the flicker of a dozen candles. "That's cruel," I said quietly. She shrugged. "Just helpful." Evelyn dabbed at the corner of her mouth with a linen napkin. "Take the advice, dear. It's exhausting to watch you stumble." I stood up. Not fast, not storming. I just stood and placed the book gently beside my untouched dessert. "I am not a project," I said. "And I am not furniture at your table. I am family." Evelyn rose with me. "You are in my house," she said, her words precise. "Do not mistake a marriage certificate for status." "Your son loves me," I said. "I love him. That should be enough." Her eyes went hard. "Love is not a credential." I looked at Mark. "Please," I said, "say something." He opened his mouth and closed it. His eyes pleaded with me, "Not now, not here." I think that's when something in me broke. Not my love for him, but a tenderness around it. The belief that he would always stand between me and the storm. Evelyn stepped close. Her hand moved. The slap cracked the air. Lauren's kick followed, a mean little arc that found the soft spot under my ribs. I folded, arms around my belly, a sound torn out of me I didn't know I could make. The room fell into that peculiar silence people use when they want to pretend they didn't see what they saw. One person coughed, someone set down a glass. I went very still. I listened for our child. I don't know why, there was nothing to hear. But I listened. I straightened. Slowly. "I won't forget this," I said. My voice surprised me. Steady, almost calm. Not any of it. No one answered. Or if they did, I didn't hear it over the sound of my own breathing. Be honest. Up to this moment, did you think they'd get away with it? What I didn't realize while I was counting my breaths was that someone else had been counting too. At the archway between the hall and the dining room, half cloaked in shadow, stood Mr. Collins, Mark's father. He was a quiet man, a listener. He'd always seemed a little apart, as if there were a pane of glass between him and the rest of the family. I had mistaken his silence for agreement. That night, I learned it was restraint. He stepped forward. His voice was not loud, but it cracked like thunder in that chandeliered room. "Enough." Evelyn froze mid-sip. The stem of the wine glass clicked against her teeth. Lauren's smirk slid off her face like a mask. Mr. Collins looked at me first. Not at my dress, not at my hair, at me. My face, my arms, the way I held my stomach as if I could press the baby deeper into safety. His eyes softened in a way that made me want to cry. Then he turned to his wife and daughter. "Do you hear yourselves? Do you see what you've become?" His voice tightened. "She is carrying my grandchild, and you treat her like an animal at your table." Evelyn recovered fast. "Don't be dramatic," she said, with the same easy dismissal she used on waiters and nieces and truths that didn't suit her. "She provoked." He lifted a hand and she went quiet. I had never seen anyone quiet her. "Not a word," he said, and the room obeyed. Even the clock seemed to hold its breath. He looked at me again. "Sarah, I am sorry." I swallowed. I nodded. It was all I could do. He didn't shout. He didn't rage. He just spoke. And in every measured syllable was the weight of years, things he had ignored, things he had wished away, things he had known and had not stopped. "We are done here," he said. "This ends tonight." Mark stood finally. He came around the table and offered me his arm. I took it. We walked out under the chandelier's soft light, past the family photographs in expensive frames. In one, a little boy with Mark's eyes grinned, his hair sticking up like a question. I almost didn't recognize my husband as that child. We didn't speak in the car. He kept both hands on the wheel, knuckles tight, jaw tighter. The wipers beat time to some private, terrible metronome inside him. At a red light, he said, barely audible, "I'm sorry." I looked out at the rain. "Are you?" I asked. Yes, he said, and I'm not finished saying it. We drove home. He helped me up the steps like I might break, and for the first time I wondered if I already had. That night I lay awake, one hand on my belly, feeling every tiny shift like a message tapped from the inside. I'm here. I'm here. I'm here. I whispered back, I won't let them take anything from you. I didn't know how I would keep that promise. I only knew I had made it. I slept an hour, maybe 2. When I woke, the other side of the bed was empty. There's a kind of fury that burns the house down, and another kind that removes the roof, the doors, and the title deed while you're sleeping. Mark chose the latter. He didn't come home until mid-morning. He set coffee on my nightstand the way he always did on weekends, even though I'd barely stomached coffee since the second trimester. Decaf, he said, almost apologetic. He sat on the edge of the bed, not touching me, as if he were a visitor seeking permission to enter. I should have stopped them, he said. I should have done it years ago. He looked at his hands. I won't ask you to forgive me right now. I'm not sure I deserve it. But I'm going to make sure you never have to ask me to protect you again. I didn't say anything. Words felt too easy, too small for what stood between us. I nodded. It was all I had. He stood. I need to handle a few things. Rest if you can. Eat if you can. I'll be back. He wasn't a shouter, my husband. He was a patient storm. Before lunch that day, every line of credit attached to Evelyn and Lauren declined. Mark didn't cut them off with a public scene. He quietly shut the doors of rooms they had always assumed would open. He had spent years modernizing the family business. On paper, his father chaired the board. In practice, the day-to-day ran through Mark. Someone else might have used that power to show off. He used it to turn the faucet to off. Their bank manager called. He had a soft voice when he delivered hard news. Temporarily suspended pending review. Such gentle words to describe a free fall. Within 48 hours, he transferred the titles of 2 properties back to the company. Corporate retreat, the documentation read, though everyone knew his mother used the lake house like a crown. The security codes changed. The housekeeper's schedule was restructured. The drivers were reassigned. It was 1,000 tiny cuts that bled a life dry. Then the other shoe. Truth. Mark is not a cruel man, but he is a thorough one. For years he had filed things, photographed things, saved things, the sort of things families prefer to forget. For rainy days, he used to joke. We were living in a flood. He handed a folder to a journalist who had never done Evelyn any favors. Inside, tax inconsistencies on a charitable foundation with Evelyn's signature at the bottom, expense reports for luncheons billed as children's literacy initiatives that looked more like fancy hats and flutes of champagne. Notes Evelyn had sent to her assistant, make this go away, attached to issues that don't go away so much as follow you like a shadow. He delivered another packet privately to Lauren's fiancé, the man with the perfect hair and the easy grin who loved a camera more than he loved people. It contained screenshots you wish never existed, messages sent after midnight, small betrayals collected like shiny stones, receipts for gifts not addressed to him. He called off the engagement the next night in a lobby loud enough for anyone to hear. Lauren said he was weak. He said he was done. Evelyn stormed into our house on day 5, as if the locks were a suggestion. She looked smaller than she had 2 weeks before, thinner around the confidence. "How dare you?" she said to Mark, voice shaking. "We are family." Mark stood in our living room like a man who had finally found his spine and his shadow both. He gestured toward the couch. "Sit," he said. She didn't. She only stared, the white of her eyes too bright. "You will fix this." "No," he said simply. "You owe me." "I owe my wife and my child safety," he said. He didn't raise his voice. "You put that at risk." She laughed. It came out like a bark. "You're ruining your mother's life for a girl who doesn't even know which fork to use." He didn't flinch. My mother ruined her own life when she forgot how to treat people. I'm just removing the cushions. She tried to cry then, tried to turn herself into a woman wronged. Tears stood in her eyes. I gave you everything. You gave me a childhood spent measuring love in chores completed and A's achieved, he said. You taught me to read faces for weather. You made me a man who confuses silence with peace. His voice softened. I don't want to be that man anymore. She left with her arms wrapped around herself like armor that had forgotten how to be armor. The next week was a study in unraveling. The charity board requested Evelyn's resignation, pending review. They used polite words. The city used better ones. Friends who had answered her calls on the first ring did not pick up. Invitations stopped arriving. For the first time in many years, she learned what no sounded like. Lauren tried to pivot to a new circle, the kind that thrives on gossip, only to find she'd become the appetizer. People asked about the broken engagement and then about the screenshots and then about the slap. She said she didn't remember. Someone else did. Mark never posted a thing. He never shouted from a rooftop. He only told the truth to the people who already wanted to hear it, and truth, like water, finds a way. At home, he cooked. He learned how to make the soup I craved and the toast I could keep down. He made lists of baby names and crossed them out when I said no, and drew little stars beside the ones I said maybe. He sat beside me when the baby hiccuped and said, as if it were a wonder of the world, he's practicing breathing. We went to doctor's appointments together and watched the monitor, that grainy universe where our son swam like a comet. Each thud of his heart was a drum I marched toward the future with. One night I woke sick and afraid, and he knelt by the bed and pressed his forehead to my hand. I should have stood up sooner, he said. I should have chosen you out loud. He looked up at me with tears he didn't wipe away. I am choosing you now. I wanted to say, it's too late. I wanted to say, you don't get to be a hero now. Instead, I touched his hair and said, then keep choosing. Revenge, people think, is fire and noise. Sometimes it's a door that doesn't open and a card that doesn't swipe and a calendar that stays empty even when you shake it. And sometimes, when done by a man who finally remembers who he is, revenge is simply the law called to do its work. Evelyn's foundation received a letter with a seal that makes stomachs drop. I didn't read it, I didn't have to. She called Mark at 2 a.m., voice small, and he let it go to voicemail. Was it cruel? Perhaps. Was it justice? It felt like it. He did not touch a hair on their heads. He did not raise his hand. He only opened the windows and let their deeds be seen. And that, for them, was worse than death. I never asked for any of it. Not the slap, not the kick, not the headlines, not the calls, not the way people looked at me with pity soft as wet bread. I asked God for a child, and for a home warm enough to raise him in. Everything else was noise. In the weeks that followed, our house became quiet in the way good houses are, full of small sounds that mean safety. The dryer clicked, the kettle sang. Mark hummed while he folded tiny onesies in a line on the couch like white flags. I walked every morning, slow, one hand on my belly out of habit and hope. Neighbors waved. Mrs. Jennings from up the street pressed cookies into my hands and said, "You're doing just fine." I cried on the sidewalk and didn't feel ashamed. Age teaches you that tears are just the body's way of standing up for the heart. On our first Thanksgiving as 3, we set our table the way I like. Mismatched plates that have seen better days and better days ahead. Flowers from the yard. The good salt, because why keep it for later? We went around and said what we were grateful for. I said, everything that stayed, even after what fell. Mark said, second chances. Our son said, bah, which we agreed meant pie. I think about Evelyn sometimes. It would be neat and easy to make her the villain who never learns. But the truth I've found is messier. People are the choices they make and the chances they refuse. She chose her pride. She refused grace. Maybe one day she'll choose differently. I pray she does, not for me, but for whatever is left of the little girl she once was. As for Lauren, she sent a postcard at Christmas. No return address. It said, "I'm working on myself." I put it on the fridge beside a scribble our son made that looked like weather. Growth is slow. I'm learning how to applaud it without moving back into its house. I have not forgotten that night. I never will. Memory is not a punishment. It's a map. It shows me how far we've traveled and where the ditches are. It keeps me from tripping over the same rock twice. I promised our son on the day he arrived and every day since that our home will be a place where dignity is the floor, not the ceiling. Where love is not a prize to be earned but the air we breathe. Where apologies are not currency but bridges. Some nights, when the house is dark and the clock ticks like a heartbeat, I whisper a prayer for the women sitting at tables where they are the meal. Stand up, I want to tell them, even if your knees shake. Put your hand on your belly, on your hope, on your future, and stand up. The world won't always clap when you choose yourself. Choose anyway. Because in the end, arrogance crumbles. It always does. It may wear diamonds while it falls, but fall it will. And dignity, quiet, stubborn, ordinary dignity, survives. What would you have done in this situation? And what would you want your daughter or granddaughter to do?